My name is Jaithirth Jerry Rao. I am here delivering this little item in my capacity as a student of modern Indian history. Although I've played different roles in my life as a business person, columnist and so on, those are not the roles germane to this session. This session is about modern Indian history. Coming into 1947, coming into Indian independence, there were different political tracks in parallel running. The two major tracks, of course, that most students are aware of are the Congress and the Muslim League. And the political difference between the two was that one of them wanted a separate state for Muslims in northwestern and northeastern India, and the other wanted a unitary India. There were other political tracks at the same time. There was a Hindu Mahasabha track, which was a wing or a movement trying to protect Hindu interests. There was a Dalit political track, largely loyal not only to Dr. Ambedkar but also to people like Jogendranath Mandal, which focused on Dalit grievances and Dalit concerns. There was also a Dravidian track led by E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar in southern India, in Tamil Nadu in particular, which had its own view of the future. And of course, there was the ever-present communists who kept changing their views every time Stalin changed his views. So initially they opposed the British war effort. Subsequently, with the Soviet Union and Britain became allies, they supported the British war effort. Initially they were opposed to partition. Subsequently they supported partition when Stalin told them to, and so on and so forth. The liberal and conservative viewpoint, particularly the economic viewpoint of support for markets, was embedded by and large within the Congress party itself. Although technically, officially, starting 1937 Karachi Congress, the Congress's official position was one of supporting central planning and socialism, nationalisation and greater state control and state involvement in the economy. This was the resolution passed in the Karachi Congress. So starting 1937, one could argue that the Congress was moving towards becoming a socialist party. But the supporters of free markets, of economic liberalism, of political conservatism existed within the Congress, be they Rajagopalachari or Patel or Pant or Morarji Desai or Purushottam Das Tandon. So it was not as if the Congress was a uniformly socialist party. There were socialist elements, including Subhash Chandra Bose and Jayaprakash Narayan and so on, but they were also conservative and liberal elements. By and large, the Mahatma was not on the side of the socialists. He was opposed to radicalism, and he was certainly not on the side of Subhash Chandra Bose in the controversies immediately before the Second World War. During the war, of course, most political activity got suspended, diverted, changed. Subhash went abroad, the Muslim League became very strong. The Congress was by and large, most of them were in jail and so on and so forth. Rajagopalachari was one of the few congressmen who was outside jail, who actually opposed the Quit India movement. The Hindu Mahasabha opposed the Quit India movement, and they were outside jail. Ambedkar opposed the Quit India movement, and he was in fact a member of the Viceroy's Executive Council through the war. As the war ended and independence came in, and when partition particularly happened, Congress became the dominant party in the country. All the other parties became pretty much, very minor and marginal. The Congress was more than 2/3, almost 4/5, going into the 1952 elections. Now, within the Congress party, as I said, there were always different elements. There was a socialist element, which got its patronage a great deal from Jawaharlal Nehru himself, and there was a conservative and a liberal element also, which had its own votaries. The government of independent India from 47 onwards, for the next 10 years, systematically moved more and more towards the left in its ideological position. This was not just in economics. Certainly in economics, there was greater and greater state control, there was greater and greater state intervention, higher and higher taxation, central planning was introduced, a planning commission was created, lots of things were nationalized, and lots of new industries were simply not allowed except in the public sector. So citizens of India, if they wanted to start a steel plant, strangely enough, in British India they could, but in free India, citizens of India were prohibited from starting steel plants. And these kind of peaked with the 1955 Avadi resolution. There was a Congress session at Avadi near Chennai, near Madras, and there the Democratic Socialism resolution was passed, and Congress pretty much committed itself to socialism and state control. The very next year, the Industrial Licensing Policy Resolution was passed and became part of government policy, which basically brought in severe restrictions on private sector participation and created lots of public sector monopolies and oligopolies. Now, this similar trend was seen in foreign policy. To some extent, India 47 to 50 remained a dominion, part of the Commonwealth, vaguely pro-Western and so on and so forth. But gradually, by Bagdong in the mid-50s, India had moved to non-alignment, greater pro-Soviet position, greater pro-China position. And China by then was a communist country. So in economics domestically, in foreign policy, and broadly in political policy, India could now be classified as a left-of-center country. It wasn't a communist country, by no means, it was still democratic, but it was veering more and more towards the left. The persons within the Congress, or who were supporters of the Congress, particularly two individuals, Rajagopalachari and Minoo Masani, they were actually very close compatriots of Nehru. Masani actually took a diplomatic post in South America in the early 50s, prompted by Nehru, after the Constituent Assembly was dissolved. And Rajagopalachari was very much in the Congress and very much a friend and associate of Nehru's. But they both got disillusioned with this continuous leftward and socialism movement of Nehru, and they decided to form a new party which they called the Swatantra Party. The tragedy we've had with the way textbooks have been written and the way propagandist positions have been presented in free India is that we have done a great disservice to the liberals who were in the political scene pre-1947. And the main reason is the Tej Bahadur Saprus, the Srinivasa Shastris, they have been classified as being pro-British. And in a sense that is true. They believed in a gradual dominion status, continued association with the British Commonwealth, pro-Western foreign policy, liberal economic policy as the way to go. And they have lost out. The post-independence chronicling completely excludes those people as if they never were there or were never important. And that's simply not true. They were both very important and they of course existed. I think if you look at the kinds of interests that many of them had, Swami Iyer, for instance, he was interested in Indian defense policy way before, when India was still ruled by the British. But he knew that one day we'll get independent. We need to have a defense policy. We need to have a military policy. We need to think of indigenous strengths. So Swami Iyer is never mentioned. Nobody even talks about him as if he didn't exist. So this has been the tragedy of the liberals who preceded independence, that they got post-independence classified as people who were not necessarily pro-British, but who were not for abrupt and non-constitutional disengagement from British rule. And that remains an important thing, Gokhale. I mean, it remains one of those principles that liberals or conservatives, depending on how you call them, people who are for gradual change, constitutional change. And I think that tradition post-independence clearly is Rajagopalachari and Masani. And in some sense, it continues to this day with someone like S.V. Raju, the late S.V. Raju, who died recently. This idea of having a balanced view. Manmohan Singh is actually within the Congress party, but he is very much of that persuasion. He made a speech at Oxford saying we need to look at our entire British Raj experience with balance and perspective. So there is that school of balance and perspective which continues, and I think some of us need to give it greater voice and greater articulation. And Swatantra, as you know, in Sanskrit and in Hindi and in most Indian languages, means freedom. So it was a freedom party. And it believed in free enterprise. It believed in minimal state control. It wanted citizens to be free to do what they wanted. It certainly did not believe in high and rapacious taxation. And in foreign policy terms also, Swatantra was definitely pro-Western in its tilt. It did not support the Chinese occupation of Tibet, which was supported by Panditji and the Congress. And it was not pro-Soviet on issues like the Soviet invasion of Hungary in 1956. It was opposed to it. So this party came about. Masani in many ways was the organizing force behind the party, and Rajagopalachari was the eminence grise, as they say, the wise man from Madras who kept the faith with the older traditions of conservatism in India. Masani had as his able assistant S.V. Raju, and Bombay became the place where the Swatantra Party gained traction. As far as the scenario in the country was concerned, the country itself kept drifting more and more leftward, both politically and economically. With each year, government intervention, government control. I mean, if the first plan in 51 was for state control, the second 5-year plan in 56 was for excessive state control, and the third 5-year plan in 61 was for extreme state control. So this was the direction that the country was going in. And the Swatantra Party decided to fight this. Rajagopalachari coined the expression permit, license, Raj. He said that the government of Free India, by introducing this comprehensive and suffocating system of controls, licenses, permits, was actually a Raj or a rule which was more irksome and more intrusive and more denying of economic liberties than even the British Raj had been. Masani, interesting, he had started life as a socialist, and in fact in the 40s he was close to Jayaprakash Narayan, Narendra Dev and the Congress Socialist Party. But after independence, he had his own moment of, I guess, discovering the failure of the Bolshevik God, Masani became a complete liberal and anti-communist in his foreign policy and global position, and certainly a votary of free enterprise within India and low taxation and greater economic freedoms for citizens. Now there was a whole host of people, N.G. Ranga from Andhra, Dandekar, Ratnaswamy, who came in to the Swatantra orbit with Masani as its central pole, Rajaji right up there, and Raju actually running the details of the party. The party gained traction in 3 states: Gujarat, Rajasthan and Orissa. And to some extent, and there's no point in ducking that issue, it was able to gain traction in these states because of the support of the erstwhile Maharajas, who, as you know, had been strong in Saurashtra, in Rajasthan and in Orissa. And they became the political backbone of the state units in these 3 states. The party did surprisingly well in 62 and 67 elections. 62, Nehru was still alive, and 67 was the first election after Nehru's death. There was the second largest party in the Lok Sabha. And it appeared clearly that there was a right-wing, liberal, conservative, pro-free market political alternative that Indian voters were going to be presented with. The Swatantra was interesting, apart from emphasizing the importance of markets and economic freedoms and freedom in general. On most other issues, the Swatantra was quite okay with its members voting whichever way they wanted, whether it was on prohibition or national language or issues like that, which were all contentious and very important issues in those early days of the Republic. The Swatantra kind of said, hey, you can vote for your conscience as long as generally you are on the side of freedom and free enterprise. It was a reasonably successful party. And then when Indira Gandhi came to power in 1966, and in 67 she saw the rise of the Swatantra Party, she kind of paid attention to what her father had said. Way back in 62, her father had described the Swatantra Party as a Maharaja party, as a Tata Birla Dalmia party, because he wanted to position the Congress as a redistributive left-wing socialist party. Indira Gandhi, in the next few years, abolished privy purses, made the princes much weaker. So the great support that the Swatantra had from the Maharajas, that support base, that constituency, weakened considerably. She also put very, very severe restrictions on the remnants of Indian private sector business, the Tata Birla Dalmia trio that her father obviously had made so much fun of. And the Swatantra kind of started losing those constituencies. Swatantra also made a few mistakes in terms of alliances, in terms of political decisions. It kind of started floundering, and in 71 it kind of lost out from being 40 plus in the Lok Sabha. It came down to a piffling single digit number in the 71 Lok Sabha when Indira Gandhi had a sweeping victory. The Ram Swatantra that was still around then merged. During the emergency, many Swatantra leaders were jailed and all the usual stuff happened. Some were not, but some were. The Ram Swatantra in 77 merged with the old Congress and with the Jansangh to form what was called the Janata Party, which won the 77 election in the aftermath of the emergency. And H.M. Patel, who was an ex-Swatantra man, actually became finance minister in 1977. But this loss of identity of getting into the Janata, which was a mishmash party and which in fact had fairly strong socialist influence also. People like Madhulimaye and so on were there, Dandavate and so on. The Swatantra lost out. And ever since then, there has been no clear liberal, conservative, right-wing, pro-market party in the country. Sharan Joshi has tried his own way with a pro-free market farmers movement. Jayaprakash has tried in his own way with a party in Andhra. But essentially, there is no pro-free market party which is not diluted with other identity issues of religion or caste or something else. Now, why did this happen? Was it inevitable? I've argued about this in my Festschrift write-up for S.V. Raju. In electoral democracies, be it the US, be it Britain or India, my argument is that voters vote first for identity and then for economics. And this is true not only of India, it's true of America, where the voter votes as an African American, as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, as a Hispanic. And issues of taxation, trade, the role of the government in the economy are frankly secondary. They come after the fact. They're used later in a cognitive dissonance kind of manner to justify whatever position one takes. This is true in England. I think even in the 19th century, if you were a low churchman in England, you would have been a supporter of the Liberals, and if you were a high spur churchman, you would have been a supporter of the Tories. Later on, you may have become a supporter of free trade or against free trade, but that was always secondary. At least this is my thesis, my hypothesis. And in India, the Swatantra purely as an economic party for markets, and otherwise you can vote on your own. We don't have a position on language or on reservations or on prohibition or on, certainly we are not for redistributive stuff like the Congress and the socialists were, then I think it's very difficult to win elections. So I think the decline of the Swatantra was more or less inevitable.